Hello and welcome to the next webinar brought to you by Strengthening the Heartland. This is our how-to series, and we're very excited to welcome a couple of new faces to our presentations. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to run through a few announcements for you. Just so you know, the handout for the presentation is available in your portal, so you can see the handout if you'd like to follow along with us. We also ask that you complete a short survey after the presentation to give us an idea of what you thought, and also if you have ideas for future webinars, we're happy to bring those to you. So you can also find the link to that survey in the portal, and if you're watching us from a recording, you can find that link wherever you found this presentation. Also, if you have questions anytime throughout the presentation, please feel free to type those into the question box. We typically answer those at the end of the presentation, but you can type them in at any time. And with that, I will introduce our speakers for the day. Coming to us is Dwayne White. He is a licensed professional counselor and a current PhD student at Auburn University, as well as Dr. Shanel Robinson. She is also a licensed counselor and an adjunct professor at Auburn University. And so we're very excited to welcome you. I'll turn the presentation over to you.
All right, a warm virtual welcome to our presentation today. I'm so glad to be here. Today we're going to be talking about how to affirm LGBTQ plus youth. As Dr. Letcher said, I am an adjunct professor at Auburn University. I have a keen interest in working, or rather researching and working with all things multicultural. So cultural competency is one of the areas that I often research. And Dwayne and I have had the pleasure of presenting numerous times together. So we hope that you all find this presentation knowledgeable and enjoyable as well. Dwayne?
Yes. I second everything that Shanel just said. I am very happy to be here and to talk to you all today about how to affirm LGBTQ plus youth. This is actually in line with my research interests, which is really centered around the wellness and the liberation of LGBTQ plus folks. And it's research, and it's an area that I'm very passionate about. It's an experience that I know very well. So yes, we welcome you all to participate in the chat feature. I know that we can't see you all and we can't hear you all, but please feel free to, if you have any questions or just any comments, please state that in the chat feature. And we also want to start off our presentation by basically allowing you all to understand how we have centered it. So our presentation is really centered in a bricolage of philosophical assumptions related to critical theory. So we believe that people's lived experiences is mediated by social, political, cultural, economic, and ideological structures. We believe that it is important to critically critique these structures and how it impacts people's lived experiences. So that's something that we're hoping to really contextualize during this presentation. So not really seeing LGBTQ plus youth, their lived experiences from this individualistic type of lens, but really trying to look at it broadly and understanding how all these things are interconnected. So yes, we really invite you all to participate. And yeah, I guess before we get started, we kind of want to know, like, where are you from? What setting do you work in? And what are you hoping to get out of this presentation? So if you could just respond in the chat feature, I think that's very helpful for us to kind of get to know you all a little bit more. So yes.
It looks like we have some 4-H educators, someone with child welfare, more extension agents, welcome. Some individuals who work for the foster care systems, school counselors, just people interested in learning a little bit more about adolescents and rural adolescents. Yes, more people from the foster care system, A voc rehab counselor joining us, a sexual violence coordinator, some play therapists. Welcome.
So we
Like
want to
a really great variety.
Right, it is. It is. So we just want to welcome you all to this presentation, and we really hope that you all are able to get something out of it. I think that also this isn't just a cognitive type of exercise, but it's also an affective and behavioral exercise. So as we go throughout this presentation, if there are any different types of thoughts or emotions or reactions that you are having, I say jot those things down. I think that that's a place of knowing, because I think the work really starts with us when we talk about affirming LGBTQ plus youth. So jot those notes down. Like if there's any type of internal dissonance or anything like that coming up for you, I think that that's a place of knowing too. So even as I'm thinking right now about myself, like I'm experiencing some discomfort in having this conversation right now internally. So as an individual who identifies with the community, I'm having all of these different assumptions that's coming up for me right now. So yeah, I think you all should write that down. I think that's a great place of knowing, and I think the work really starts with us. So
Sure. All right.
all right, so this is our agenda for today. So we're basically going to go through some of the learning objectives. We are educators at heart, so we love a learning objective. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we're centering our presentation, and then moving into understanding the interlocking systems in which these youth kind of interact with. Because in order to begin to affirm youth, it not only starts with us, it's also about paying attention to these different systemic issues that are happening as well. If we want to see real change happen, we have to see these issues as being, we have to see it from the systemic lens. And then we're going to move into talking about some actionable, tangible types of strategies that you all can utilize. And these strategies are very broad in range because we're trying to appeal, to a broad base, right? So, but we just knowing that, just hearing Dr. Letcher talk about some of the sites that you all are working in, I'm starting to kind of think about some things that may be helpful as well. So, yeah.
All right. So those learning objectives, like Dwayne told you, we're educators at heart. So we wanted to make sure you knew what we're hoping that you'll gain from this. So the first thing is a deeper understanding of LGBTQ plus related issues at the local, state, and national level. So we've also included some information about the states that you dwell in, just to make this a bit more relevant. The second learning objective we have is exploring policies and practices that produce disaffirming practices of LGBTQ plus youth. So it's important to know, how far we've come, but also how much further we have to go as well. So it's important to know which policies are still oppressing LGBTQ plus youth. And the other or last learning objective is learning strategies to affirm and form allyship with LGBTQ plus youth. So these are our objectives. Dwayne is going to cover the first half of this presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to him, and then I will chime in as he presents.
Yeah, we always chime in together, so yeah. All right, so I really wanted to start off just by kind of positioning our presentation and saying that, hey, queer and trans youth, so I might bounce between saying LGBTQ plus youth or queer and trans youth. So I just wanted to say that as well. And queer is an all-encapsulating term that's very representative of the entire group. So you see that listed in research as well. It's actually a term that the LGBTQ plus community has reclaimed in many ways. So that's something, just some side notes. But yeah, I want to start off by saying that, yeah, these youth are not monolithic, right? That they have a range of different intersecting personal and social identities that really provides us with a unique understanding of how they experience the world. So, youth, they identify as, come from different racial backgrounds, right? Socioeconomic status, right? When we think about ability status, right? Gender, class, sex, all these different categories, right? It's important to remember that as well, that when we're talking about these youth, not to view them in like reductive terms and things like that, because even though we'll be talking about them in sort of reductive ways, right? But just making sure that we have this intersectionality hat on and that we are contextualizing this information and thinking about how it fits in my own in my area, right? And with the youth that I'm currently working with. And then also thinking about how, you know, these youth, like they live in a top-down type of world, right? It's a very adult world out here for youth, you know? So thinking about how that plays a role too, and how youth are socialized into different roles and into different positions too. I think about, you know, Eric Erickson's identity versus role confusion stage, right? And how this is the area in which youth are trying to understand themselves, trying to understand what groups are affirming and non-affirming, right? Trying to explore what all of these intersecting identities kind of mean to them. So also like really thinking about that developmental aspect, but then not only thinking about you know, just them identifying as an LGBTQ plus youth, but also thinking about like age and uh, other intersecting identities and how that plays a role into their experience as well. So. All right, so we wanted to really just start off by positioning our presentation on the lived experiences of Nigel Shelby. I think that there's a lot of knowing and like we can learn a lot from stories, right? We live a very storied life. And I think that there's knowledge in stories. So we wanted to start off by really positioning this presentation on Nigel Shelby. So Nigel Shelby is from Huntsville, Alabama. And he completed suicide in 2019, and it was due to anti-gay bullying that he experienced at school. He was 15 years old, and his mother like described him as a fun-loving teenager who she accepted and affirmed and loved unconditionally. You know, Nigel had dreams, he had aspirations like other teens. He was loved by many others, right? But he encountered the world a little differently from other teens, and he wanted it all to cease. He was seeking a solution to what he was experiencing. So the problem he was experiencing was not intrapsychically like located, right? It was due to the heterosexist systems that we live in. So it's not individuals or the youth who perpetuate this bullying. It's the system. So we have to see things from a systemic point of view and understanding how these things are all interconnected and how we all participate in these different systems. So that's what I mean when I say that we can't look at affirming youth experiences, not only from this individualistic perspective, but also looking at it from a systemic level and seeing how these things are all interconnected in order for real change to happen. So as I go throughout this presentation, you know, I want you all to think about Nigel. You know, think about how his experiences may be in line with the things that we are mentioning today. Think about some of the youth that are in your own contexts, right, and how they may experience the world. I know, you know, Dr. David Shea, he once said that, you know, when we talk about you know, things like death and what's on people's death certificate, you know, and things like that, I'm wondering in this moment, it makes me think about how, you know, we talk about Nigel and how he completed suicide, but I'm wondering if it should be like death by anti-gay bullying, you know, because that really externalizes the problem a little bit more. So yeah, so just some things to kind of think about a little bit. So yeah, we would like to dedicate this presentation to Nigel Shelby. All right, so we want to take a pause and show you this video to really center our presentation and start some dialogue surrounding affirming LGBTQ plus youth. So we'll jump right into it. And I apologize if there's any type of lag or what have you. I know sometimes that can be tricky and weird. So
there shouldn't be a reason for you to not love your son. In my mom's house, it's God first and then family. In my family, it's just like a man is supposed to be masculine and a woman is supposed to be feminine. Since I was raised in the church, I honestly thought being gay was wrong. they gather around a family table, and they sign a piece of paper basically saying, I'm no longer a part of this family, and if I step foot on the property, they'll call the police, and I'm basically disowned, and they don't recognize me as my mom's child anymore. I just walked around for hours and hours. So I just was like, okay, I need to fall asleep. And I found this one street, and it was like really quiet. There was no one else there. And it was like a little corner. And I was like, wow, I'm about to do this right now. Like, I'm about to sleep on this dirty ass sidewalk. So it's like, it's bad enough being homeless, but like if you're homeless and you're a youth, or you're homeless and you're gay, or let's say if you're homeless and you're a person of color, or you're trans, it just keeps putting you more in danger. Like people will say, oh, like you have to like really try to be homeless to be like actually homeless, because apparently there's so many resources out there, and it's so easy to get back on your feet and stuff. In a city such as LA, since there's such a high population of homelessness here, beds are being filled up like that. You can't even get into a winter shelter. I can't be mad, because if you stay mad at someone, you just become bitter, you know. And it's like, I just gotta remind myself that like I'm out here across the country. I have my own family that loves and support me here. I got what I need. Family is people that love and support you. It's not always your bloodline, you know. Just had enough of like fighting every day, waking up. When you're in a place like that where people don't care, you don't have to like pretend or act or like put up your guard or anything. You can just like relax and just be chill, and like, you know, because like when people don't care you're gay, you don't care you're gay. Like you have pride in it. You're like, you're proud of who you are as a person.
All right. Thank you for Chanel. Thank you, Chanel, for sharing that. So I just want to take a pause and just say, like, what? So what was coming up for you as you were listening to this team? What was your reactions? What do you think this team? What do you think he needed?
We might have a couple people writing a little bit, maybe take a little bit. I think it's so powerful how he talked about, just needing support from someone, and maybe he didn't get that from his family, but he found friends, he found a place to get some of that support. So powerful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And being able to identify different protective factors. We know that LGBTQ plus individuals, sometimes we find fictitious, or I should say, we kind of construct our own families in many ways. When sometimes the family of origin may not be supportive. So I think that's a great point that you mentioned. Um, yeah.
And sometimes it can also be helpful to connect to when maybe you didn't feel supported, right? And recognizing that this is a life for some LGBTQ youth or queer youth. They have to walk this life of not feeling supported, right? Not feeling loved, not feeling like they can be their authentic selves. So even thinking about, connecting to the last time you felt like you weren't supported, and imagining if this is where you had, or the life that you had to walk, or the place that you had to exist.
And it also makes me think about how, as he was telling his story, um, he wasn't supported, by his family, but it had like this trickle down effect, right? So it ended up to where he was homeless, right? Sleeping on the streets, and we know that how that can expose you to other like adverse, you can have other adverse types of experiences because of that. So I think that it's important to see that aspect too. So not only thinking about his own individual experiences, but thinking about his life, trajectory, right? As it relates to, being able to hold down a job, attending school, right? And things like that. And just from being on the streets and how that can also affect you in many ways. So thank you for sharing that.
I don't see any others in the chat box yet.
We'll go to the next slide.
Move forward.
All right, so to talk about how environments are non-affirming or oppressive for these youth, we wanted to use Polinsky's model of oppression, liberation, and psychopolitical well-being. And basically, this model really helps us to understand the contexts in which these youth may exist in, right? So it helps us to understand how these youth experience political exclusion in many ways. So we will discuss how fundamental rights are not afforded to this community of individuals. We will look at violence, so understanding how violence is used to isolate folks and instill, a sense of fear and anxiety, right? Which helps these systems kind of continue. I think it also helps us to understand how these individuals who experience oppression can be victimized and assaulted just based on the identity categories in which they belong to. So this speaks to that social stigma aspect, right, and the devaluing of different groups of individuals. And then we'll look at the psychological deprecation aspect as well, so understanding how individuals' well-being is affected. All right. So we wanted to really start off in looking at how these youth may be experienced like the political exclusion in South Dakota. We'll also be looking at some of the laws in North Dakota, but I also understand that there may be some individuals who may not live in these states. So maybe I think that this is a good reference point to just to seek out this information and look at the different laws that may impact LGBTQ plus youth. So I think that's a great reference point for you all to kind of take a look at as well. So looking at the laws related to LGBTQ plus individuals, specifically in the state of South Dakota, we see that there are currently no non-discrimination laws on the books, right? So individuals can be discriminated against in healthcare, barred from, being able to attain private health insurance, right? And I think that's a very important aspect when you think about trans youth, right? And some of their unique needs when it comes to, preventative care, basic physical exams, hormonal treatment, and gaining or being able to get gender affirming, surgeries, right? And things like that. So I think that by not having this in place, it really impacts them in many ways. So I think that that's something that we have to be mindful of, right? So yeah. And then also I should mention how, not only looking at, in the state of South Dakota or North Dakota or in your individual state, but also just thinking about just nationally as well, how there isn't any federal legislation that really protects the LGBTQ plus community broadly. I know that there has been recently a Supreme Court case that's come down the pipeline that provides protections for individuals in employment, and that's protected under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but that's it. Like that's the only protection that's provided for them. So there's no protections in healthcare, discrimination in healthcare. There's no protection in being able to, get a house, right? There's no protection in the criminal justice system. So it's important to note that, and also to understand that, there's an equity bill that's currently sitting in the Senate that it's been sitting in the Senate for about 2 years, which will provide just broad protections and will provide just an overhaul and change, the laws currently on the books. But it's been sitting on the desk of our senators for about like 2 years, year and a half. So that's something to kind of think about, right? When we talk about political exclusion, right? And how these youth their experiences and just at the LGBTQ plus community in general, how, we're not providing basic protections for these individuals, because we know that that by having laws in place, it really deters people's behaviors, right? And being able to act in this way, right? So it serves a purpose, right? It's important that we have some type of legislation that protects these individuals. So something to kind of think about a little bit more. And then as we move forward into looking at specifically laws related to LGBTQ plus youth, again, we see that. Well, let me say this. What sticks out to you? What sticks out to you about when you see this chart?
You can go ahead and type that into that question box. Just the lack of protection overall.
Okay.
Someone's commenting about conversion therapy still being on there. No protection for gender diversity. It makes me realize how much work there is to be done.
Yeah. I agree. There is a lot of work to be done. Like we've made some progress, right? But there's still some progress that's needed. I think that that law that bans local schools and districts from passing LGBTQ plus non-discrimination and anti bullying policies, like that's a huge one, right? So we don't have any protections for individuals in schools, and this is where a lot of the problems start at, right? When you think about Nigel Shelby, right? And his experiences in school, him experiencing the anti-gay bullying in school, and how also in the state of Alabama, there are they bar schools, local schools, from being able to make to create these types of non-discrimination laws, right? So I think that that's a huge part, because it affects not only their well-being and mental health, but a lot of times the research shows that individuals will drop out of school, and things like that. So when we think about, again, life trajectory, right, and how these interlocking and how these issues really holistically affect these youth in many different ways, I think it's important to realize. And again, yeah, that the conversion therapy, it's still happening in many different places. So yeah, they have protections against of course, licensed professional counselors and other licensed mental health individuals. There are laws that state that, hey, you cannot engage in these types of practices, right? But this doesn't include, your local pastor. This doesn't include Joe Blow down the street. These individuals aren't included in this aspect. So yes, these types of practices are still happening in many states across the nation. So it's something to be very mindful of as well. So. And this also, this makes me think about, because I'm actually right now working for a company as a diversity consultant, and I'm conducting these focus groups to understand staff members' experiences in providing multicultural and social justice type of counseling to individuals during this current time, during COVID, right? During Black Lives Matter, all these other social issues that we have going on, right? And then, and one of the things that came up was how there was this youth who was in foster care, who it was recommended that he attend conversion therapy, that the organization felt that it was best that he attend conversion therapy, right? So what is the underlying message underneath that, right? That something's deficit or ill and wrong with you, right? So I think it's important to remember that too. Like, what's the message, the underlying message underneath that? That something's deficit and wrong with you, and how that can affect one's mental health. But yeah, even in North Dakota, we see some of the same types of laws. We do know that there are some non-discrimination laws and policies covering LGBTQ plus students, which is really good. And there are no current negative laws in schools that ban local schools from being able to develop legislation that protects these youth in school. So I think that's a great benefit, right? But there's still some other areas, right, like conversion therapy and things like that. So.
And also noting that these things have long-term impacts beyond the initial therapy, beyond them sitting in that experience. These youth also have to relive that in their other interactions, in their life interactions. So noting that, these policies that are in place now will have an impact on individuals collectively who've experienced this for years, for their entire lives.
I agree, Shanel. And again, some of the same types of policies, right? So I don't want to, belabor the time because I know we got an hour or so, but I just wanted to really highlight and just trying to get your perspective on this, right? And you being able to see how these laws like really impact people's lived experiences, right? When we don't have when we don't have legislation on a book that protects these individuals. So yeah. All right. So when we think about violence, right, queer and trans youth are significantly at risk of verbal, physical victimization in various social cultural environments like school settings, right? Bullying puts youth at an increased risk for depression, suicidal ideation, misuse of drugs and alcohol, risky sexual behaviors, and can affect academics as well, their academic performance. I'm currently in the process of working on my dissertation, and I'm looking at the experiences of LGBTQ plus people of color. And let me tell you, in these narratives, just hearing about the physical and also emotional type of abuse that these individuals are experiencing, like I have to take a step back, so like it's happening, and it's due to, what does it due to? Why do we see this? That this community of individuals experience this type of victimization, right? So I think that that's another component to think about. Like, why is this happening disproportionately? Why are these individuals disproportionately affected in this way? What is the messaging that we're sending? What's the embedded values or valuing, right? We live in a heteronormative and heterosexist society. That's something to kind of think about, and how these things play a part in everything. And even when you hear me say that, like what comes up for you right now in this moment, I think that may be telling too, or a place of knowing, right? Because even when I'm saying it right now, I'm like, Dwayne, maybe don't say those type of words. But I'm reminded of Dr. Kendi Ibram, who wrote the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, and he said that one of the things that we have to do in order to dismantle oppression, we have to identify it, we have to name it. There's power in naming it. So first being able to identify, so understanding how these things play a part in my own individual context, and then after I identify it, then being able to name it. There's power in calling it out, and in order to dismantle it. So yeah, just some things to kind of think about a little bit more. Okay, and then lastly, when we talk about the psychological dynamics of deprecation, just thinking about how these different, did we miss a slide, Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so just thinking about the psychological dynamics of deprecation, and how these youth, their overall well-being is impacted. When we think about these different social cultural environments that they have to exist in. I think about like this one particular study that showed that Black LGBTQ plus youth reported that they received just constant messages from their parents, from individuals in the school, from overall society, to conform to, heteronormative type of ways of being and existing, and conform to gender norms, and things like that. And they talked about how they had to hide and negotiate these different aspects of themselves. So what they would do in order to hide these aspects of themselves, they would fight, right? They would show that they're sexually just showing that they're sexually I don't know the term that I'm looking for right now, but just sexually prowess, right? Just so being able to highlight that aspect as well. So and how that put them at risk in hiding aspects of themselves, right? Because guess what? They didn't have access to to support. No support. They didn't have access to maybe just education about HIV and things like that. And they talked about how they felt that because they had to hide aspects of themselves, how that not only denigrated, how they viewed themselves and decreased their overall self-worth, but they felt that that was one of the contributing factors to them being diagnosed with HIV, because they didn't have that support, because they were isolated. They had to isolate themselves to exist. So I say that again for just so that we can understand how these things again are interconnected, and how these experiences that these individuals have are connected in many different ways when they exist in unaffirming or non-affirming environments. So yeah, just some things to kind of think about a little bit more. And then just overall, we know that the literature and research just shows how queer and trans youth have greater vulnerability to a wide range of psychological, physiological, and social problems, as you see here. So just to see how all these things are interconnected and play a role and really affect how one views oneself and how it affects their overall well-being. And I say, stop. We're gonna take a stop. Pause. So although we have been, just calling out and speaking truth to power in many ways, right? Calling out these different oppressive systems in which these youth, they experience. We don't want to paint a picture as if they aren't able to resist and transcend these different systems, right? So I think that that's something to really highlight. So in our work, it's important for us to not only speak truth to power and to call out these different systems that these youth, exist in, right? But it's also important because I think that if we only look at it from this one lens, we could be doing the very thing that we're wishing to dismantle, and reducing them to just that, right? So it's important for us to really understand the ways that they resist and transcend these different environments. So really trying to identify their strengths, their protective factors, right? We know that particularly, again, my research is really centered around LGBTQ plus people of color. So we know that people of color have different cultural resources and revenue, just a reservoir of cultural revenues that they can kind of access that can assist them in being able to resist and transcend these different environments. So maybe I have been socialized by my parents, although they are in some respect I may experience marginalization in the home from my parents, but there are other cultural values and things that they have instilled in me that I can use that will help me to be able to become resilient. So again, it's important to not view these youth in reductive types of terms and in reductive types of ways, but being able to understand also the ways in which they are able to resist these different systems. So yeah.
Right. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and start talking to you about queer theory and allyship. So when you think about queer theory, it's both a theory, but it's also a political action. And it can be summarized as exploring the oppressive power of dominant norms. And what queer theory does is it contributes to politics and ethics of difference. It challenges those dominant norms, especially those of sexuality. And about the role of an ally, is to address power and to contribute to the making of a space in which the person who is oppressed gets to have their voice heard and listened to. It's not just a matter of being heard. A person's words must matter and not be dismissed. And this is from Vanessa Reynolds. And I thought that statement was so powerful. Three things I want to, talk about within this queer theory and allyship is learning to respond to backlash, right? So position your privilege, right? If you are someone who is privileged in the intersectionality of these youth, acknowledge that you may be heard amongst the group that both differs and is in disagreement with the youth that you're supporting. Your connection to what may be dominant gives you an ability to partner and elevate the voices of those who are not being heard. Remember not to approach critical conversations with any animosity, right? We want to make sure that we're doing that from a place of humility. So not shaming those who have different beliefs, but at least trying to educate them, right? To elevate the voices of those who are oppressed. The next thing is that collective accountability. So how are we coming together to make change? A lot of times, Dwayne has mentioned this, that individualistic nature. So I'm responsible for me and me only. But having collective accountability amongst those that you know. So, find those who are allies of queer youth. Be accountable as well when no one is watching to work towards that same agenda, right? Also, if you know someone who is spewing homophobic slurs, make sure that you're holding them accountable, right? So you can approach them with warmth and empathy, but do something, right? That's what collective accountability looks like versus just holding yourself accountable, right? I'm not the one who's saying these things. I know people who are, but it's not me. But holding and having that collective accountability. The last thing is hopeful skepticism. So making sure that you're examining yourself. You are human, right? So at times you may need to examine your positionality in relation to others, especially if you have that privilege. So we have to make sure that we're checking the privilege that exists. Being mindful also of the noise that may exist in your head. So what may happen when that noise is in your head is that you project your beliefs on someone else, your worldviews, your ideas. So being mindful so that you're not abusing the power that you have. Reynolds also stated that she's always becoming an ally, right? We don't necessarily arrive, right? We're always learning. We're always gathering information. So it's something that you consistently work out as you identify the areas in which you are privileged.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that, Shanel. I think that that's a great framework that can guide the work that's needed to affirm these youth. We also want to transition and provide another framework and then move into talking about some specific things that you can do intrapsychically, right? And then interpersonally, and then focusing on the community level, and then thinking about the social and the political and systemic level as well. Some different actionable steps that I could take. But this framework really helps us to understand how to eliminate oppressive type of contexts on a systemic level. It transitions from looking at the intrapsychic aspect in the beginning and waking up and becoming aware of these different incidents and things that may be happening, and then helps us to understand how to get started, right? So what are some of that work that I need to do for myself? And then it transitions all the way into looking at interpersonally, right? And forming bonds and connections with other individuals who are interested in dismantling these different oppressive systems that operate in LGBTQ people's lives. And then we move to looking at the systemic level. So I think that this is a great framework that helps us to understand how to create safe and affirming environments for these youth. So we're going to go through each of these different steps as we progress through the rest of this presentation.
All right. So when we think about that intrapersonal level, some things that you can do is engage in critical reflexivity. And we know that that's examining your own beliefs, examining your own judgments, and making sure that you're consistently doing that. Acknowledge that privilege exists and that oppression exists. It's not something that we just create, right? Educate yourself. Seek knowledge in areas that you don't have it. Don't let other people set the standard for you, right? There's no cap at what you can do and how you can partner with those who do need you. Specifically, the group we're talking about today, which are queer youth. They're adolescents, they're children, right? They need adults who are going to push and advocate for them. Also, find little ways to draw support from oppressive systems. So some things can be like just starting with yourself. Don't laugh at heterosexist jokes, racist jokes, insensitive and demeaning jokes. It's not funny, right? It's not. There's a group of people that are harmed by those jokes. Actively promote change in how systems are organized around privilege. So not supporting businesses that are inaccessible to people who are not welcoming or not accepting of queer youth. Also, you don't have to do anything dramatic, as Johnson said, or earth-shaking to help make change happen. As powerful as systems of privilege are, they cannot stand the strains of people doing something about it, beginning with the simplest act of naming the system out loud. Say something.
Yes.
Right? In silence.
Yes, like we all have these unquestionable beliefs about the ways in which the world works, right? And this is our framing of the world and how we exist, right? And we project these things on other individuals, right? So it's important to sit back and really take some time to engage in ourselves and really question those different beliefs that we hold about the ways in which the world works, because we tend to in an ethnocentric way project those on under other individuals, when we should have really this like cultural relativism type of perspective, where we are viewing individuals from their own lens, right, from their own personal experiences. Like Shanel said earlier, being able to center my allyship on individuals' lived experiences, being able to listen to those folks, right? So it really does start with us and being able to dismantle or kind of do that intrapsychic work.
So the next is on an interpersonal level. So the first thing is listen. Listen to those whom you are advocating for. They are the expert on their own experience, not you. So it's really important that you listen. Also, make sure that you're bracketing your assumptions and your worldview, right? We're not wanting to project our worldview onto those we are advocating for. Engage in one-on-one role plays to brainstorm ways to address daily challenges. Confront internalized heterosexism through narrative storytelling techniques. That is so, so useful, allowing you to tell their story, to frame their story in the way that are true to them. Dwayne, looks like you want to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, because when you think about it, it allows them to really deconstruct their story and really externalize what they're experiencing by utilizing these types of approaches, and then being able to create a new story and framing that can guide, that they can use as they walk and exist in the world. So I think that these narrative type of techniques can be used in different settings, right? So being able to help you to maybe asking basic questions, and how are you recruited to think about this way? How are you recruited to think of yourself in this way, right? So you hear the term, how are you recruited into thinking about yourself in this way, right? So that really helps to externalize what these youth may be experiencing in the world. And we know that there may be daily challenges, microaggressions and things like that. So really helping them to really identify ways in which they can transcend these different environments.
Mm-hmm. Also teaching self-advocacy skills, right? So helping them to find that independence where they're able to advocate for themselves, right? Even outside of the work that you are doing together. Implement an ecological and intersectionality framework. Identify protective factors and strengths. Protect their privacy. I'm going to start to move a little bit quickly because I think we are running out of time. Build strong connections with queer youth to demonstrate acceptance, right? And keep the lines of communication open. Let them know that you're there for them. Once queer youth feel rejected, it can be really hard, oftentimes, queer youth feel rejected. So you want to make sure that you're accepting them, again, that you're warm, you're displaying that empathy. It's important for them to know that their families, friends, schools, and communities support them. And oftentimes these things may be at odds. So this is something that we want to make sure that we're doing in the ways that we can to affirm them. We also want to make sure that we're protecting their privacy, okay? We don't want to disclose any of their information or discuss their sexual identity issues with parents or anyone else. This is something that they're coming to you about. So without their permission, you want to make sure that you're not doing that unless there is an immediate threat to their safety or well-being. The other thing we want to do is provide interpersonal support to students by providing a safe place to talk about their sexual identity and to navigate decisions about disclosing or concealing it with others. And then we also want to accept youth as they are, regardless of how they identify, reveal, or conceal their sexual identity.
And then I'm sorry.
Okay.
So like it can be something as simple as also like just looking at the ways in which my office and organization is set up, right? So what are the symbols that we have around the room, that shows that this is an accepting environment? So do we have pictures of LGBTQ plus individuals up? Or, do we have like a flag showing support, right? So it can be even something as simple as that. Even putting your pronouns in your email signature, right? That can be that can show, hey, support and solidarity as well, and create an affirming environment. So even subtle things like that, I just wanted to mention that. Sorry.
Absolutely. And that's great to mention. Oftentimes when I visit different places, you can see the different flags and know that there are individuals who are in support of, and that's an amazing thing. So thank you for mentioning that. At the community level, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to how privilege and oppression occurs in your context. So in the places that you dwell, assessing the unique needs of your of your community. Excuse me. I was going to go to university, but making sure you're assessing those needs, right? So every community is different. So those needs are going to be different. What do youth or queer youth rather in your community need? Create alliances. So GSA groups that encourage authentic self-expression at school. Make spaces that queer youth can dwell in. So environments that are friendly and accepting. Support and network with organizations that fight poverty, because this is something that is impacting queer youth as well, as demonstrated by the young men and by the video that we showed. Also making sure that we're forming collaborative interdisciplinary relationships to address the issues facing this population. We want to hold workshops and educate other professionals, parents, and community members. So not just, again, stopping with yourself, but pushing forward, seeing who else you can educate about this, who else you can get involved. Form relationships with local activists in the community, specifically in queer communities. So the Phillips and Rats also talked about how can we establish a safe environment at school? We know that children are oftentimes being bullied at school. So schools can send a message that no one should be treated differently because of who they are or who they are perceived to be. And if we add sexual orientation and gender identity protection to schools, we'll have anti-discrimination policies that also assist with this. We also want to make sure that we're conducting social emotional learning activities in the school to foster peer relationships and help students develop empathy, right? So also teaching other children who may not identify, right, how to be empathetic towards those who differ from them. So on the public level, we want to make sure that we're connecting nationally with LGBTQ plus organizations and leaders, using technology to facilitate dialogue regarding the issues affecting these individuals. Sign petitions. Uh-oh, goodness, I'm gone. Sorry. Sign petitions. There are so many different petitions that go out through various organizations. Read them. See what they're about. There are so many laws and policies that Dwayne mentioned that you can get engaged in, that you can facilitate change in. Also, write letters to your politicians, right? They're the people that were elected that who can change legislature, change laws for the betterment of affirming youth. Also, practitioners must use their knowledge and commitment to social justice to advocate for policies and services that reflect the needs of LGBTQ plus communities. All right. Another thing is, well, what I want to ask you all to do is start working for change today, right? Don't let it stop here. Don't let this be the last time that you seek information on queer youth who needs you. So again, don't let people set the standard for you. I said that before. Oftentimes we're influenced by the homogeneous societies that we operate in, right? We operate in societies of maybe people who look like us because that's what we're comfortable with, right? But don't let others set the standard for you. If you feel this on the inside of you, you feel it churning, and it's something that you are, passionate about, and you want to partner and you want to form allyship, do it. Make a list of things that you can actually do right now. Sometimes we set these big, far-fetched goals, and it's hard for us to really, grapple with those or obtain those. But think about small things you can do, such as reading a book, right, on oppression. I have the book right here, right? So we want to make sure that we're engaging in those things, participating in peaceful protests. Of course, we're in a pandemic, right? So safety first. However, again, signing those petitions, reading books, educating yourself, and even thinking about how can I rank these things from most risky to the least, right? What am I most comfortable with, and how can I work up to those other goals that I have? And then start there. So thinking, what small risk for change will I take today? And of course, maybe you didn't have time in that quick statement that I made, but even thinking after this, what type of things might I be able to do in my community that I can start with? What type of things might I be able to do within myself that I can start with? The goal is that you just start, right? So what we have here is some resources. I believe Dr. Letcher has shared all of this information with you. So I won't go specifically into each one, but there are resources here listed for South Dakota and North Dakota. So if there is additional information that you're looking to find in your state, these will be great organizations to look into. And these are not all inclusive, right? There are so many other organizations that also champion and do this work. So I encourage you to, again, continue to do your research. The last thing I wanted to leave you all with was this flow of consciousness. So Singleton, in his work with how to have critical conversations, created the flow of consciousness chart. And I want to leave you all with the decision to flow in your consciousness, moving on this continuum of knowledge. So are there things that we don't know we know, right? So I don't know, I don't know. There are things that we don't know, but we think we do, even in relation specifically to this presentation that we had today. Then there are also things we know we don't know. And today, in gaining insight or even being moved by the knowledge you had or the lack thereof that may exist on the topic of affirming LGBTQ plus youth, I challenge you to seek a will to learn. So, moving along this diagram, not necessarily arriving, right? So knowledge is continuing, right? It's not something that we arrive at. However, seek a will to learn, to engage, to partner, and ally behind a group that needs you. Into I know, right? So I know what people in my community might need. I'm partnering with them. I'm there with them. And not for the purpose of having arrived, but for the purpose of caring and continuing to seek knowledge from each individual you find yourself in allyship with. So remember, we are the experts of only ourselves, and we must seek to understand the current concerns of others. So when you reach that point where I know I don't know, how can I move towards this? I know, right? Pushing beyond that, I know I don't know, and I'm going to stay there, right? I don't know, I'm not even going to worry about it, but challenge yourself towards that will, right? I really want to know. How can I know what my community needs? What queer youth need from me? To that knowledge. And again, I just wanted to leave you all there in that flow of consciousness, continuing to gain and seek knowledge for the assistance and help of others.
Yeah, I guess we want to, this is our references, and I guess we want to thank you all for attending our presentation. And I just want to leave you all with, and thinking about like this trouble, as Johnson would describe it as when talking about oppressive systems and things like that. Like it's everybody's responsibility, excuse me, to dismantle these different systems. Like we're all connected to it in many ways, because on one end, someone experiencing oppression, there's always someone on the other end who is experiencing some privilege, some level of privilege, right? So we're all connected to these different issues in many ways. So we all have to see it as a part of our problem, right? And then I also want to leave you all in saying that there's nothing, so in thinking about this presentation and the things that we have said today, I want to leave you with Johnson's quote. And he says, "There's nothing wrong with you. There's a lot wrong with the world that we live in." So thank you.
Thank you all for being here today.
And thank you too. This was wonderful. I know we're right at time. There were a couple questions that if people want to stick around to hear, I'd like to get your perspectives on these. We have an individual who works with a youth organization, and there were a couple of teen leaders in the organization who are gay, and they're the first leaders in the group who have ever been open and out, and that caused a little bit of tension among some of the parents. And so the youth experienced some discrimination with parents saying they weren't going to send their kids to camp, and other kids refusing to room with the students. And so this person's wondering, is there anything specific that they can do to continue to affirm those youth? They did say that whenever the topic came up, they talked about it, and they let parents know that these are outstanding youth. Their sexuality has nothing to do with their leadership skills, and but they're wondering if there's other recommendations you might have.
Okay, so the first thing, I appreciate you for sharing that. Yeah, that was I can only imagine how it was like, or what it was like for those youth and experiencing that. I think that from what I'm hearing, it seems like the first step would be to we talked a lot about being able to identify, name it, and call attention to it, right? So I think that that's the first step, and being able to do that and using maybe my privilege in some type of way, like, and I say privilege in whatever, in all senses of the word, right? So even thinking about, hey, I'm an adult, right? So I can speak on behalf of these youth. Like, that's privilege in itself too, because as I said earlier, we live in like a top-down type of world. But being able to identify, name it, and call it out, being able to educate individuals as well. I say also, like, you're not isolated in this experience. So I would bring it up to like starting some conversations as an organization surrounding how we are supporting these youth. I think that that's that's a huge component of it. So not you're not isolated in any type of way. So being able to connect to other individuals and start some conversations in your organization on how you all can support these youth. So yeah, I think education, calling attention to it, calling it out, and then also connecting with other folks is very important. So I hope that was helpful in some type of way.
Thank you. Someone else really liked your quote of "what small risk for change will I take today?" But they're wondering if that's a direct quote from someone, or it is.
Yeah, it is. It's from Johnson. I can't think of the person's last, the person's first off the top of my head, but yeah.
Should be able to find it with the last name. I was going to attribute it to you guys and make you famous here.
I would.
I wish. Okay, one more question. We have a graduate student in speech and language pathology, and their clinic provides voice therapy to transgender clients. And so they're wondering if there are some ways to make their clinic a little bit more welcoming. Like you said before, adding pronouns. Is there anything else that you could think of that might be helpful?
I think what Dwayne said earlier, even making sure you're having inclusive images, having representation in the flag, right, to let them know that you're accepting. So even those indirect things that says like we're here, even having training maybe within the facility, so that individuals know, right, that this is a service that we're offering. How can we be inclusive? How can we be accepting? What does that look like? So I would say even offering a training to staff who work there and are going to directly be encountering youth who are receiving services.
Yeah, I second everything that Shanel said. Even forming organizational statements, related to your stance, right? Even I think it also starts internally. So what does our staff look like? Who are we hiring? So I think that that's also a great place to start too when we talk about supporting these individuals and what their needs are. It's also just doing a survey around our office, and what does our office look like? How are we supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion? And then I think a lot of times when we have these conversations, we don't center it on these individuals, their voices, but I would actually talk to them and figure out like, right? And what ways can I support you, right? So I think that it's important to also center it on their lived experiences and being able to ask them these questions as well, because that's true allies. That's true allyship is when we do that. So
All right, I don't see any other questions in here. Lots of thank yous to you two. People really seem to enjoy the presentation. And I want to say thank you as well to our audience. Just a reminder, if you will please take a minute to do that survey right as you exit, that really helps us out. And we look forward to seeing you at future presentations. Thank you so much, Shanel and Dwayne.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.